if we'll just go over here, these are some of the use cases which I'll call your attention to in a moment. So first, I'll just show you our tool. So what you're looking at here is the PromSec Endpoint Manager dashboard, right? We call it PEM just for short. And what the dashboard does is it answers this challenge of taking thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of little irregularities, little things which could be used as a weakness to exploit and to compromise or to otherwise wreak havoc in your network. And I'll explain how that works. So the idea is, the principle is, there is a policy that you define. You say this would be secure, and you can define it automatically according to NIST or CIS or a bunch of standard best practices which are considered secure. And once you've done that, you can say any deviation of any endpoint on my network will be noticed as an issue. And that's something that I can then go in and remediate. And instead of just having a general idea of, I have an antivirus and I think it's fine and I think it's up, you can actually see, is it deployed? So I'll just talk you through the dashboard a little bit, just so you know what I mean by that solution. So first of all, the primary challenge in contending with, as we said, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of issues is their number. You're swimming in a sea of information. Even if you query all the endpoints, which is great, you still find yourself struggling to say, okay, what do I do first though? Where's the actual information? What do I address? So let's just go over the components of this dashboard. The first one over here on the left is the statistics. And what this tells you is we're answering a few very simple questions, which is what and where and what I do about it, right? So the first question is what's wrong? What's my actual status? So here, through a few different categories, there's a bird's eye view breakdown of what's actually going on. If I jump on over to the compliance, for example, there's a few central, most important and most critical issues which we find often need to be remediated. So for example, I'll show it to you in the view in a second as well, but let's just say endpoints with antivirus issues. This is a very common compliance issue, which is to say I have this EDR or this antivirus and it's great and I pay for it and it's deployed in my organization. But do I have a way to know where it's actually reached? Is it on all my endpoints? Is it deployed everywhere? Is it enabled everywhere? Are there updated versions of it on every one of my endpoints? It's sometimes very hard to know. So here, what the endpoint manager can do is it sort of acts as a watchdog to any other service that you might be using. And it says here, of your endpoints, which I can see the 79 endpoints in this current, this test scenario, which we're working on here, I can see which ones are updated or not updated. And so the same is true for any other one of the metrics which have been identified as a problematic in some way, whether it's active CVEs or something that's missing or a blacklist item. A blacklist item, for example, would be an application which you've configured as not optimal, which you don't want to have, in your network. So if I'll just give a quick example of that, right? So okay, so I have what's wrong, and now I go over to the view. So the view is a component which shows me where it is, because again, when working with a big network, I need to know where the problem is so that I can then contend with it. So in order to work with this, you've got all these groupings. So there's a few default groupings, which is the ones you can see here, which are by VLAN, which is to say not logical network segmentation. And you could also present it by the OS types, which is to say the builds. But you can create a group out of anything that you like, because you in your organization, every organization has their own needs. You might say, I want to split it up by department. I want to see how we're doing on this one ad hoc project, and I'll configure a few endpoints to be part of that. Or I can say the executive suite in my company, as they often are the target of many attacks, and their computers are the most vulnerable and the most sensitive to attack. If they're compromised, it's the worst blow. So I'll create a group just of that. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to focus in and zoom in on where the issues are and to start to deal with them. That's the view components, and I'll demonstrate how that works a little further in a moment. Over here in the details, what I've got is a further breakdown, because we're slowly zooming in from left to right. This shows me the actual identified most severe issues which I have to remediate in my organization. As you can see, there's quite a lot of them, right? So there's still a lot of issues to contend with. So how do we winnow it down? How do we find the actual things that I need to fix when, again, we're in a sea of information? So what I'm going to show you here, this is the filter. And it's got this default filtration to give me a sort of beginning spot. But what I can use this with, I can add things to my filter and focus in on what I want to work with. So for example, let's say I want to make sure that I'm remediating all the critical security gaps in a certain build. So I've got a group of that, of the Windows 10 enterprise computers, and I could say, add that to filter. And if I'll just jump over to the use cases here, right? What could I be looking for, just to illuminate the kind of things that we might be using? Because obviously we won't get into all of them, because we're trying to make a quick run through. So for example, I've got a critical Windows update. Do I have it everywhere? I know there was this CVE, and Microsoft quickly released a patch. Do I have it on all my endpoints? Or as we mentioned before, the EDR solution, is it active everywhere? I have an application which I'm suddenly worried that I've seen active somewhere in the network. And I can quickly narrow it down and say, let's filter by that one application, that one blacklist application. And then it'll show me all the endpoints where I have it. And I very quickly have a to-do list of things that I need to fix to be compliant on that one issue. Okay, so what we've done here, just to demonstrate how that's worked, we've added this group to the filter. So now our group of endpoints that we're looking at through the filter is 5. And the number of issues that we're looking at are only the issues which are relevant to those 5 endpoints. As you can see, it's still a lot of issues. These are pretty, obviously this is a test case, but these are some pretty non-compliant endpoints. So obviously the other charts, of course, are accordingly updated, and the details over here as well. I didn't touch on the trends yet, so I'll just mention this. What this does here, the trends, it allows me, for the executives or for somebody who's tracking the metrics of some kind of progress, it allows me to see whether I have a positive or a negative trend. So for example, let's just say as a use case, I want to say I want all of my endpoints to be compliant from an antivirus perspective. I can see already here on these, in the current selection, that none of my computers have a CVE, an active CVE, that all of them have antivirus issues of one kind or another, which means I need to deep dive a little bit more to see what, but I know that they either don't have it deployed or updated or enabled. I can see that 100% of them have blacklist applications present on the endpoints, and one of them has a OS security update which is missing. I can see that at a glance before I've needed to dive in too much. But I say, okay, wait, before I dive in a little more than that, I might say this is still a lot of issues, right? So they're sorted by severity, but I can add another line to my filter. Let's say just add a rule, right? If I just want to find the ones which are the most egregious, so I can find, first of all, I'll fix the really problematic ones. So I'll just sort by issue severity, and I'll say high. Below high, it'll be filtered out. So it'll take a second to load because obviously we're going through the whole database of your organization. But once I've loaded it in, now I can see that I'm down to 10 issues. So very quickly I've said, okay, this group of computers which I've configured, what are their issues? Oh, you know what, that's still too many. I need to find first the critical ones. And I've added another line to the filter which shows me just the critical ones. So now I've got a very manageable list of only the most critical issues which I need to deal with. And I can say, okay, so what are those issues? In order to then remediate, and in order to then use that knowledge which I've gained from filtering, I can go down a little bit more and deep dive all the way to the level of the singular endpoint and the single issue that I have to remediate. And that I can use in order to fix problems. Because if I zoom out again, right? What we want to do, what we know the challenge is actually keeping my organization secure by closing all the little gaps. It's not enough oftentimes to just purchase some, expensive security solution and say, okay, I have this most advanced DDR and now I'm covered. Because often it's the little things that you don't notice. It's the passwords, or it's the updates, or some security thing, or some application which you weren't taking into account. It's all these little things. And what PEM allows you to do is contend with this veritable sea of information and quickly narrow it down to the things that you need and find the actual problems so that I can quickly become more secure. And of course, all of this is, methodological, and you can create your own filters and apply them as you like. And, there's more features that I don't have time to get into, of different types, but, that's just a very quick overview of what I can do with the dashboard. Okay, so that was that run through. What I'll do now is I see that a bunch of people have asked questions in the Q&A section. If anybody has more questions which have come up as I've talked us through this functionality, you're welcome to send more, but I'll start by answering the questions which I already have here. Okay, so somebody asked me, can you help my organization be compliant to accepted best practices and compliance standards? So yes, this is something that we work from. We're not just taking a general type of things which we deem to be wrong, but instead our policies, the default policy, which you can configure to say, this is how I want my endpoints to be, this would be considered compliant. You can start that, I mean, obviously you can change it however you like, but you can start that from saying, okay, let's start with NIST compliance or CIS compliance or some other accepted best practice security standard. And that is what will be considered compliant. And any deviation from that will be the issues that I deal with. Somebody asked, okay, so I get this is tying back to what Ori spoke about, this ransomware. We were talking about the case study of how actual malicious actors act nowadays. What they do is we often need to contend with ransomware. So as Ori said, part of our answer to ransomware is obviously a very catch-all solution, which is have good backups. But before that, before the level of, where I've already been compromised and I'm dealing with that and I have to somehow reconstitute my whole network, to not allow that to happen, PEM can be a very instrumental tool. Because with an endpoint manager, I have full visibility. And to enact ransomware or deploy it within my organization, I would need to first get access to the organization and spread laterally with lateral movement throughout the organization and go undetected and be able to infect different computers with whatever ransomware I'm using. So with every stage that I just described, you would be stopped on a network which is using compliance management, because the suspicious application or the suspicious thing that would be dropping the initial malware, might be detected. And the antivirus on every computer, which might be, potentially infected with such a thing, would be, I would ensure that it's up to date and I would know how to catch on to these things. So the general enforcing of correct cyber hygiene before the stage where we get to, dealing with ransomware as a solution, as a situation which is already upon us, you would deal with it proactively in advance. So somebody asked, is this a new dashboard? It looks totally different. So yeah, of course. I don't know exactly who asked this question, but we've had a few versions of dashboards. And what we're looking at here is the latest version of the PEM dashboard, because we keep, as we progress and we add new features and new functionality. This is a developing progress, a developing feature, let's say product, which is constantly adding new functionality and new things. I think those are all the relevant questions. I would say in general, I don't want to get too into it. Technical questions, we'd be happy to answer in offline. I don't want to get into them too specifically. Okay, so that's, I think that concludes the Q&A, unless anybody has any more question. So somebody asked again, does the tool help from protecting from ransomware? So I'll reiterate, it doesn't constitute a backup solution, which is not what this does, but it does provide you the ability to ensure as much as possible that your organization is secure from ransomware ever getting access to your network. And if some malicious actor does get access to your network, which, God forbid, this endpoint manager would help ensure that they wouldn't be able to spread laterally throughout the network. So at those two stages, which are the critical stages for actually deploying some kind of malware, you would be protected by PromiseSec Endpoint Manager. So I think that concludes for now the section of the Q&A. Those are the use cases. We've been over this, and I could just mention the last one. For example, if you add a new endpoint to your network, this is also another thing, because you need to quickly bring new endpoints up to par. If you've got a new work, or if you've just integrated something new, you can very quickly see them from A to B. It doesn't matter if they've inquired before. Once the second you've added them to your network, they're part of your policy compliance system.
Nisha, a question here: is this available? Is this dashboard available to customers? And is it part of the PEM 6.4? And the answer,
right, so
yes.
Yeah, or you want to answer?
You can answer. Go ahead.
Sure. So yes, the dashboard that we're just looking at now is the current available dashboard. It's deployed with some of our customers. We're rolling it out now because this is a very new version which is just rolled out. You know, anybody who gets PEM now, this will be the dashboard that you will be working with. This is not like some eventual product that we're hoping to disseminate. This is the current dashboard that we work with. Somebody else mentioned in a question agents. This is a somewhat technical question. How do you know how many systems have your agents? So this is actually a very interesting question because we don't use agents as a rule. We do have a system in which you could integrate remote computers, which would be slightly separate. But in general, PEM functionality does not rely upon agents. You don't have to install or deploy agents on all the endpoints in your network, and rather there's a different system where you query endpoints, and in that sense, you know, it runs much lighter than another kind of manager, which might otherwise require you to install agents on your network. Okay, so these are the use cases. That was the Q&A. All right, I think that pretty much brings us to the conclusion of this little webinar. Thank you again, Ori, for your illuminating talk.